So my upcoming book, The Dragons of Deeper Fen, is coming out in just a couple of weeks. And a few weeks back, I learned that Caffeine and Legends had chosen Dragons for its upcoming book club. For those who aren't aware, Caffeine and Legends is a book club slash coffee club that matches up coffee with its books for its subscribers. And me, being a big coffee nerd, which you're about to find out, I thought it would be fun to share my daily driver, my coffee recipe. So stick around, that's what we're going to talk about. I'm Brad Bollier, and this is A Novel Approach, a channel dedicated to writing technique, but also inspirational pieces and some things that are sort of loosely tied to writing. Given that the book is coming out from a coffee club slash book club, I thought it would be fun to share my recipe, which is cobbled together from several sources, including James Hoffmann, the Coffee Chronicler, Oscar Christensen, and Prometheus is the largest contributor. I'm largely following his recipe with a few very minor tweaks. And he modeled his after an automated machine actually that goes through 4 distinct cycles to brew the coffee. And so that's what we're going to be going through. And so I'll start over here, and I'm just going to go kind of down the line and explain what I go through each morning and talk a little bit about the equipment as well. I'll have links to all these in the description in case you want to take a look at any of this stuff. They are affiliate links which will help support the channel. If you use those, I really appreciate it. Thank you. Starting over here, we have the Stag kettle from Fellow. So this is a smart kettle. It keeps the water at a certain temperature. You dial it with this dial here. There are other settings that you can choose, like the Celsius versus Fahrenheit. And you can pour, and it creates a really nice even stream, put it back, and then it'll bring it back up at the temperature and just keep it there for you. And you can hear it has reached its temperature. And so we're going to be using that. But first I get my filter and the brewer ready. So this is a Hario switch, and its claim to fame is that it is a combination immersion and percolation brewer. And so I'll show you how the filter goes in, but it allows you to immerse the grounds using this little switch. Okay, so this goes up and down and activates, I don't know if you can see, a little ball bearing essentially that either allows or stops the flow of water through this funnel into the graduated cylinder. This comes with the switch when you buy it. And so the first thing I do is take care of the filter paper. This just goes inside of the funnel there, and you have to get it in properly, you have to fold over one side of it, and then I open it up and I run my finger over the other end just to allow it to sit in the funnel properly. And when you do that, this little end here kind of acts as a hook, and it catches more easily so that it sits nicer when you're pouring the water, which I'll show you in a second. And then this will eventually go on the scale. So it just sets like that, and the coffee and the water goes in and it goes down into this cylinder, and then you can pour. So I'll set that aside for a second. And then I have this scale. So this is a combination scale and a timer. And the timer is super useful because you're timing certain phases of the coffee process. So this is a little no-name brand. It was more inexpensive than the other types that were available. Again, I'll have the links. And it's been really nice. So this is just a little vessel to weigh the beans in. James Hoffmann had one, and I scoured Amazon for something similar. And this is very close if it's not the same one. And then we have the beans themselves. This is an Ethiopian light roast. I don't know if you can see that. You have several choices to make in the brewing process. Among them is the water temperature, and the water temperature is usually going to be dictated by the type of coffee. Lighter roast coffees are more difficult to extract flavor from, and so you want to use a higher water temperature. So I'm very near the boiling point in this case. Another choice that you have to make is just how much grounds to use. And so that is going to be dictated by what you want to get out in the end. And so this is an Ember Smart Mug. I really like this thing. I didn't really think much of smart mugs. I thought they were kind of unnecessary, but I have to admit it's really nice to have a coffee that's at temperature, at your chosen temperature. You can kind of raise or lower that with an app on your phone. You know, as much as I'm here at home writing so often, I forget about coffee now and again. I get wrapped up with stuff, I get called away, and I come back and the coffee is at the right temperature. And so it's really nice. And so this holds something like 310 grams. And so I want to get 300 out of the brewing process, 300 grams. And so I'm going to be putting in a little bit more than that because the coffee grounds themselves will retain some water. And so I'm looking for 320 water going in to get about 300 out. And so that dictates how much coffee I'm going to have to grind. And so I'm looking for 21 grams, and the ratio between grounds to water is something like 1 to 15, 1 to 14, 1 to 16, somewhere in there. You can kind of start around the 14 and change mark, and then you can go up or down. That's part of the fun of trying out different coffees and seeing how much flavor you like, how much you can pull out with the brewing process, that sort of thing. All right, so I've tiered this here, and so I'm looking for 21 grams, basically. And so I'll weigh this out here. The coffee's weighed out. I'm almost ready to grind. I have a water sprayer, just a little bottle with filtered water from the fridge. And this I spray onto the coffee itself. This is known as the Ross droplet technique. When you spray beans with a very light mist of water, it reduces static. And so the grinder at the bottom of this manual grinder, and this is true of an automated grinder as well, if you don't use that technique, you'll have a ton of dust that builds up because the static itself builds up and it retains and attracts that fine powder. And so using that little bit of water, just a couple of sprays from that little bottle, reduces the static quite a bit. And so I can go for days really without cleaning the inside of the dust because it just isn't there. It all gets into the vessel itself, the cup at the bottom. And so I'm ready to grind. And so normally what I would do is do squats for a while because I try to get an exercise whenever I can during the day. I am not going to bore you with that. I'm just going to grind. And when I said I didn't want to bore you, what I really meant was I didn't want to make a fool out of myself. So, okay, so this is done. And so this grinder is a K Ultra from Espresso, 1Z Presso is how you spell it. It's really nice. A lot of manual grinders, I think almost all of them, have some way to change the grind size. And so this has numbers around the edge of the top here, and you can change it to what you want. And so I have this one on 6, which is a fairly fine grind setting, somewhere between an espresso grind and a French press grind, a little bit closer to the French press grind. And so that's good enough for me for this, I found over time. And I mentioned the variables that you can change for coffee, and this is one of them, just how fine you grind your coffee. And so if you find that things are a little bit too bitter when it comes out, too sour, you can back off of the grind size, make it coarser. And if you're not getting enough flavor, enough body out of the coffee, you can go finer. In the world of espresso, they call that dialing in, but you can dial in with other types of coffee brewing. So this is ready, but I can't pour it in just yet. The filter is paper. It'll impart a taste unless you rinse it first. And so that's the first step. So I'll move this switch up so it impedes the flow, and then I'll just pour some into the Hario switch. And this kind of does double duty. It preheats the switch itself and then the vessel below once I let it go through. So I just pour a certain amount in, make sure I'm getting the entire filter wet. Give it a second and then let it drop. So that just takes a second, and then this water is just discarded. Okay, and then the grounds can go in, and then I create a small divot. You make it look like a volcano kind of, and the reason I'm doing that is because during the pours you want to get the water onto the grounds as much as possible. What you want to avoid is pouring onto the filter paper itself, because that creates what's called a bypass. Where the water doesn't actually come into contact with the grounds themselves. It goes through the filter paper and around and then down into the vessel without actually having gotten any flavor extracted from the ground beans. Now we're all set. I'm ready to go to 320, but I'm going to do it in 4 phases, as I said, and you just split them into 4. So whatever you decide you want to pour into the grounds, you divide by 4. So I'm going to do 80 per phase, and they're all very similar. And so the first phase, we're going to go again to 80, but I'm going to pour it at a speed where this takes about 30 seconds or so. I've reached 80, so I'll stop. And so this is called the bloom. The bloom allows the coffee grounds to off gas, carbon dioxide and other gases, because it gives off a lot, and it just gives the grounds a chance to get rid of that so that the other phases can extract more flavor. I let it go to 45 seconds, at which point I flip the switch and let it drain, and I go till 115. So 45 to 115 is draining, and then the last three phases are very similar to one another. Okay, we're there. So when I'm pouring, you're trying to go steady with stream. You can raise it up a little bit so you can get a bit more agitation. And that's part of what you're looking for as you pour. You're trying to get all the grounds kind of evenly. So you start in the center, move to the outside, and then you can move back in. Avoid the paper, always hit the grounds. And by having it up a little bit higher, it'll agitate the coffee in each of the phases. The amount of time that the coffee is immersed and not percolating is something you have control over. While that switch is up, it's just sitting there like a French press and steeping. And then when you drop the switch down, the coffee runs through the grounds and extracts different sorts of flavors. For lighter roasts, again, lighter roasts are harder to extract flavor from. And so you wait for about 15 seconds from your goal weight to dropping that switch, flipping it down. If it's a medium roast, you go for about 12 seconds. And if it's a dark roasts are easier to extract flavors from, so you only go about 10 seconds in that case. And you keep going until you can see the bed. And when you do, you flip the switch up. So now we're on our third phase, and you just repeat the process. So we swirl from the center, going to the outside, and then coming back in. And you go at a medium speed. So we go to 240, and then I'm gonna count to 15, and then it drops again. The last one, final phase, changes just slightly from this. You go through the exact same steps, but you give it a swirl after you pour the water. And what that does is it pulls off any remaining coffee grounds from the filter and allows them to get extracted in that final phase. Oh, and this is really important too. As you're pouring, these bubbles will form, and make sure you look for coffee babies. There's nothing funnier to me than like seeing these couple of eyes and a mouth like growing in horror as the coffee drains. So yeah, very important. Keep a lookout for that. I can see the bed, so I'll flip the switch up and do the final pour. So we're going to 320, and then give it a swirl, and just gently. So that's enough. Just a couple of swirls. If you go too heavy, what happens is the fines, those little particulate matter, will kind of embed themselves into the filter, and it will make that final draw go very slowly. And you don't want that. You just want consistency. Just a light swirl is fine, and then let it go. And that's it. You know, I'm at the 5-minute mark right now, so it takes about 5.5 to 6 minutes for the brewing process, a bit more to kind of get set up and such. To me, it's worth it. It makes a great cup of coffee. I've tried other types of coffee brewing. I had a Chemex, I've done the French press, I've done a few others, and I really like the Hario switch recipes. So it's done. All I need to do is pour. So for all my fellow coffee nerds out there, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you give Caffeine Legends a look, and also keep an eye out for the Dragons of Deepwood Fen. Please like and subscribe. It really helps. A novel approach is going to be focused on writing mostly, different techniques. I'm going to be creating some beginner's guides, so keep a lookout for those. But I'm also going to be doing some deep dive edits where I can share with you some concrete examples of day-to-day edits that I'm making and try to pull out the lessons that I'm taking from those, and hopefully you can use as well. In the meantime, enjoy your coffee, everybody, and right on.